Welcome to the Arnold Arboretum's Tree Mob, zooming in on tree swallows. This program took place on May 20th, 2020, on the grounds of the Arnold Arboretum in Boston, Massachusetts. Because I didn't record the initial part of the tree mob on video, I've edited in my introduction and some words from our presenter, Karla Noboa, along with some still photos taken by some of the Arboretum's regular birders. So let's begin. Though circumstances are currently strange for humans during this coronavirus pandemic, birds are carrying on as usual. This means that the Arnold Arboretum's NestWatch volunteers have been making the rounds of various nesting boxes installed in the Arnold Arboretum's landscape to record observations of house shopping, territorial battles, nest building, and egg laying. Karla Noboa, a second-season NestWatch monitor and avid birder, started the Feminist Bird Club Boston chapter and serves as the chapter network chair of the Feminist Bird Club Board of Directors. Learn more about the Feminist Bird Club at molly-adams.com/feminist-bird-club. When not monitoring nests, Karla Noboa is Community Engagement Manager with River Network. NestWatch is a citizen science program organized by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Every year, thousands of volunteers across the country diligently collect and submit data on bird nesting attempts to the NestWatch database. The cumulative contributions provide a research database for ornithologists studying breeding behavior and population trends over time. Karla Noboa began the program explaining that tree swallows build their nests out of dried grasses and straw and line them with white feathers to provide some insulation for the eggs, which are pure white. They look for cavities in standing dead trees or trees with woodpecker holes. In the suburbs and cities, trees with holes in them are typically taken down, reducing the availability of nesting habitat for cavity nesters. At the Arboretum, we construct nesting boxes for tree swallows. The boxes are mounted on poles and installed in grassy and wet meadow areas where the swallows can find plenty of flying insects. Tree swallows are extremely agile flyers and eat flies and other insects that they catch mid-air. They are iridescent blue on top and white on their bellies, with a minor fork in their tails. Unlike barn swallows, which have deeply forked tails and brown on their bellies. So now that we've shared a bit about these birds, Karla is going to visit one of our tree swallow nesting boxes.
When we check the box, we'll give it a light tap. There is a bird in there right now. We actually saw it go in there. So hopefully it'll fly out before we actually open it. But if it doesn't, then it might fly at us. So I apologize in advance if the camera gets shaky. But I think it'll be fine. So when we look in the box, we're gonna check there's eggs in there. The last time that I saw, it's possible that we won't actually see the eggs because tree swallows like to use feathers in their nests. They use the feathers as a way to insulate the eggs on the nests. So sometimes the feathers will cover them. You can't really see everything, but we'll see what it looks like today. And then we're gonna check the other box, which is also a tree swallow box, but there's a little surprise when we get in there, which I think we can talk about when we get closer. Dylan is holding the camera, so he'll point the camera into the box once we have it open, and we'll look in there for a couple seconds, close the box and walk away, and then if any questions come up between now and then, we can answer them as soon as we're done. So we're gonna approach the box, and we wanna be, just a little careful. So if you point it towards, it might fly out. Did you see it? Okay, so the swallow flew out. It's getting pretty close to us. Oops. We have these nails here to keep the boxes closed. They just pop open. And then if we open the box, you can see the feathers there. And then any eggs that might be in there. I can't tell. Okay, so that's the tree swallow nest. You can see that there were eggs in there that were covered with feathers, which is a really good way to insulate it. The tree swallows will sit on their eggs, and the eggs have been there for at least 4 days now, as far as I know. So as a NestWatch monitor, you check the boxes every 3 to 4 days. And that's how you can really see the cycle that's happening with laying eggs and the eggs hatching. So I think that the eggs will likely hatch in the next week. So usually once the eggs are laid, the nest takes like a week or two to build, and then the eggs get laid and they take about a week or two to hatch. And then once the eggs have hatched, it's about 14 days or so until they fledge from the nest. So once they have fledged from the nest, that's it, you're done monitoring your box. And it happens really fast. So the longest process, I think, is just waiting for the birds to find the boxes and build the nests. But we're way past that now. So I'm sure next week we'll probably have some hatchlings in there, which will be really cool to see. So the other thing I'll say about these boxes and the landscape is that there's a lot of competitors. So the biggest competitor are house sparrows, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. They're all over the place. And house sparrows will take over a box pretty quickly, and they can build their nest in just 1 day. So they will use dried grasses, green grasses, and a lot of trash and cigarette butts. So if you open a box and find it filled with greenery and trash, it's definitely a house sparrow box. And house sparrows are actually not protected, so you can remove the box. Oh, I'm sorry, I got distracted because the tree swallow just caught a feather mid-air, and I believe it's going to take it into its box. You can't really see it, sorry, but it was cool for me to see. So yeah, we try to mitigate those competitors that come up. So if we do see a house sparrow nest coming in, we will remove the house sparrow nest. But you're not supposed to remove any nests, really. It's just that house sparrows are not a protected species. But with house wrens, that's another competitor. There you go. You can see that the feather in its mouth. That's pretty cool. House wrens are another competitor, and they really take over. They're really, for lack of a better term, they're just kind of psychotic. So there's not much you can do about a house wren nest. Once it's in there, you just have to leave it alone because house wrens are a protected species. And they build their nests mostly of twigs and egg sacs. So if you put a box at your house, or if you have a nest at your house, just make sure to leave it alone. You don't want to touch it. You can monitor it through the NestWatch program, but otherwise just leave it alone. And if you ever see a baby bird on the ground that has feathers on it, you just want to leave it alone. Fledglings do go through a process where they go out of their nests and they are on the ground and their mom is still feeding them. And if you try to move them, it disrupts their cycle. So it can be very damaging for the bird. So just a quick word of caution, if you do ever find a baby bird, just leave it alone. So I think now we can move to our next box, which will take just a minute or two to walk over to. So I think we're gonna show you a picture while we do that. And if any questions come up, just let me know. I can answer them while we're walking.
Where in the Arboretum are you?
So we are, you know, I actually don't know like the formal name for this area. Pam, maybe you know, but it's the meadow just in the conifer collection.
It's called Kent Field. I don't know if it's on our map as Kent Fields, but the crew and all of us call that Kent Field. And it is this low wildflower area that rises up to the conifers from Hemlock Hill Road. Another question is, do these birds migrate?
Yeah, so tree swallows do migrate. They're here right now for their breeding season, but in July and August, they'll start migrating south to Florida or Central America. And it's interesting because right now they have their pairs, they're making their nests and having babies. But when they migrate, they actually migrate as a big group. And they have communal roosts in the non-breeding season. So right now we're seeing them pretty solitary or in pairs, but once they migrate, it's actually quite a sight to see because there's hundreds of them that move together.
Right. Do they have more than one brood or typically just one?
Typically just one. So we're just about here at the other nest box.
Why do they nest in boxes rather than in the trees if they're tree swallows?
Yeah, so tree swallows are cavity nesting birds. They certainly are nesting in trees. But since we are in an urban area, there's a lot of competition for different cavities, basically. So there's not a lot of options. So we put out these nest boxes just as an alternative option for them. And they are attracted to the boxes. So it's not that they won't nest in the trees. It's just that these boxes are here and they're a good option. So that's why they are attracted to the boxes. But you'll see plenty of tree swallows in cavities and in areas that are wet and fields that are just there naturally. Okay, so right now we're just on the other edge of the meadow, and we have our tree swallow box right here. So, I'm calling it a tree swallow box, but since I started monitoring it, what's been interesting is that a tree swallow started building its nest in it, and then a chickadee took over. So this will be a cool one to look at. You can really see the difference between the two nests. So you'll see some dried straw on the bottom, and then you'll see moss on the top. So chickadees like to use mosses and things like hairs to build their nests, and they're actually excavators. So the way that we set up a chickadee box, you actually put something like sawdust on the bottom when you're ready to install it into the landscape, because the chickadees like to take that out and then build their nest. So that's a really important part of the nest building process for them. So if you're interested in putting a box for a chickadee out at your house, that's just one thing to consider. So this is an interesting case because I can only imagine that the chickadees saw the straw in there and took some of the straw out and then started building their nest. And we do have eggs in there, so we're gonna see if they've maybe hatched. When I was here on Sunday, there was 6 eggs, and they had been there already for a little while, so we'll see what it looks like. Sorry, it's hard to be out here talking about birds and also seeing a lot of different birds. I keep getting distracted. So we're gonna take a look. We're gonna do the same thing we just did, but it will look very different. So just try to see those differences that I mentioned. Okay, so let's see if there's a bird in here. Might be empty. Sorry, that scares me every time. So the chickadee just flew out. So now I can open it without being so scared. So you can really see the difference of the straw, and then you have moss and actually a lot of dog hair. I think chickadees pick it off of dogs or find it on dogs or on the ground. Can you see the eggs in there?
Yes, we can. Beautiful.
Yeah, so that's the chickadee nest. And we have actually a number of chickadee tubes on the landscape that are full of chickadees. But for some reason, the chickadees wanted to take over this box. So they do like both the tubes and the boxes. But I think there's just an abundance of them on the landscape. So that's kind of why they decided to take over that box.
Right.
So that's basically it. This is what I do every 3 to 4 days. There's over 30 boxes on the landscape throughout the Arboretum. And there's, I think, 7 volunteers that are checking them every 3 to 4 days. So it's a very active program. And this is just such a small little area. I think up on Peters Hill, there's also bluebird boxes. So if you're interested while you're on the landscape, paying attention to that, it would be, that'd be a good place to look to see the tree swallows and the bluebirds. I'll give you some chickadee facts. So chickadees are really small. I'm sure all of you are familiar with them. They're tiny little birds with a black cap. They're called black-capped chickadees. We can hear it right now, actually. It's making an alarm call and a song. So you can hear it, maybe you can hear it. It goes, hey, sweetie, hey, sweetie. And then you hear this kind of like honking. I don't know how to describe that. But it sounds really angry. And that's because we are here and that we checked its nest. So it's actually alarming all of the other birds in the area to a predator or some kind of danger, which in this case is us. However, we are at a safe distance now, so it just needs to calm down. But chickadees are also known for having a call that goes chickadee dee dee dee, so you can hear that actually. Mm-hmm. And the more dee 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 dees that there are at the end, the bigger the threat. And so there's a lot of other species that actually recognize that. And when they hear a chickadee making that sound, they will also start making calls. And they'll come to see what's going on. So if you're ever out on a hike or in your yard and you hear that, that's actually a good indicator to look around, maybe for some kind of predator like a hawk. I always hear that when I'm out. If I hear a ton of chickadees, I'll look up and typically there's some kind of big bird around. Another really interesting thing about chickadees is that they actually, I don't know exactly how to say this, but they like delete their neurons. They just get rid of them at the end of every year so that they can grow new ones. And that's a way that they can adapt to the environment and adapt to new broods. They're also very social species. So by doing that, they're able to kind of reset their brains and adapt to any new situation that may be happening when there's a new season. The oldest chickadee ever counted was 17 years old. So they can, they do come back to where they have nested before. And here in Massachusetts, they're a year-round species, so they don't really migrate. They are here year-round. So I think those are probably the coolest chickadee facts that I have to tell you. And they eat seeds. Any questions?
One of our participants, Lorna, is saying that you can find an animated map of tree swallows migration at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website.
Oh, that's great.
Was that tree swallow bringing the feather into the nest that already has eggs?
Yes, it was. Yeah, we saw it catch the feather midair, and then it took it inside the nest, and then it came back out without the feather. So it certainly put the feather into its nest there.
Okay. What's the difference between barn swallows and tree swallows?
Barn swallows and tree swallows, as far as I know, they do look different. Barn swallows have kind of a red-brown belly, but they are also blue on the back. I think the way that they nest is also a little more different. And I can't really totally speak to that. I'm not 1,000% sure, but maybe Brendan can speak to that.
As far as barn swallows go, yeah, like Karla said, they're different species. So it's a different type of swallow. There's slightly different ranges. And yeah, we don't get too many of them nesting in the Arboretum at all that I know of.
Is the shape of the box special or the size of the box?
Yeah, so there's different boxes for different species. The tree swallow boxes do have a specific diameter for the entrance hole, and that prevents larger species from going into the box. The size of the box is pretty standard. That you'll see that with really any kind of nest box. The biggest difference is the entrance hole. One thing that we didn't see was the chickadee tubes. So if you're here at the Arboretum, you might see these PVC tubes on the landscape. Those are called chickadee tubes. And they're just deeper. So chickadees do prefer to like go into a deep cavity. So they're just slightly more attractive to chickadees than they would be for a different species. So it totally depends on the nesting habits of the species. The boxes will vary slightly, but that's the big thing with the tree swallows is just that they have a specific diameter of entrance hole.
Okay. And did that, do you know why that barn swallow abandoned the nest and it went over to chickadee, or
Yes, I
a
can't.
territorial thing?
Yeah, I'm not actually totally sure why that happened. I've never seen that happen before. I don't know if the tree swallow abandoned the nest or if a chickadee just happened to come in at the right time and start building its own nest. But once the other nest was on there, the box just became unattractive for the tree swallow. So I think that's kind of how that happened. I think you have to, it's kind of a first come, first serve situation with the boxes.
Is it better to put the boxes in the sun or the shade or under a tree or not?
It depends by species. So tree swallows like big open fields, which is why we have the boxes just out here in the middle of this meadow. Chickadees like to be actually in more wooded areas. So that's another reason why I found it slightly surprising that the chickadee took over this box. And another thing to consider is the predator species. So house wrens will go into chickadee tubes. If you put the chickadee tube too close to the edge of a wooded area, But the more you put it into the wooded area, the less likely you will have a wren approach, just because of the habitat preferences and nesting preferences of the species. So if you're interested in building your own boxes and installing them, the Cornell Lab has a really great resource on the NestWatch website, I believe, where you can see different species and how to build their specific homes. And it'll also tell you what species are in your region that might be declining and could really use extra nesting boxes. So I would highly recommend checking that resource out if you're interested in doing this at home.
I didn't think chickadees needed help, and even chickadees need help. So
yeah, they're actually a declining species.
kudos to Cornell. They do have all sorts of resources on their website. The birds are so noisy. It's amazing.
Yeah, this area is always really active because we're just on the edge of a very densely wooded area. So
Yeah.
you have a big diversity of species specifically here.
Great. I think we just have a couple more questions. I'll try to blend it into one.
Okay.
Does the iridescent blue coloring serve a purpose, such as reflecting light? And do you know if these are male or female birds?
Yeah, so I'm actually not sure if there is a specific purpose to the iridescent color besides sexual preference. So a lot of times with birds, you'll see male birds to be very colorful. For example, the northern cardinal, you see the male cardinal's bright red, but the female cardinal is more of this like drab yellow-brown color. So the females are attracted to the color on the males. So typically you'll see some males might be brighter than others, and that's just a competition trait.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not entirely sure what it is with tree swallows, if that's just if it's just because of sexual preference or if there might be some other reason.
Do both males and females sit on the nest?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so both males and females are here on the landscape. And I believe that they both do stay on the nest and feed the young.
Do you know what insects they prefer?
I don't know specifically what insects they prefer, but they do like those types of insects that you find in wetter areas and that are really small, and they catch them mid-flight. So they're typically insects that, that are flying.
Okay. And do you have a sense of whether the cold air has affected that food source or their behavior?
Well, that's the interesting thing about this program. We are, looking at these birds and eggs, which is really cool in and of itself. But the broader purpose of the program actually helps us track things like climate change. So the way that migration happens and breeding happens, it all lines up with the seasons and food availability. So if there isn't food available at the time, then the breeding season will start later, which then can be an indicator of climate change because the seasons are happening later or things are not happening on the normal cycle that they should be. So I think this season started actually quite early because it got warm pretty soon. So then those food sources were available earlier, which attracted the tree swallows here. But last year, I remember the season started a little later, I think, because it was colder earlier in the spring. So it all aligns, and birds are really smart, so they just know. I can't explain the science behind the fact that they just know, but they do. So that kind of explains the timing of all of this.
Somebody wants to know what the birds are on your shirt.
Oh, some kind of warbler, but I don't think it's a specific breed. This is actually a t-shirt of a skateboard company called Warble. So they're using warblers as their thing, but I saw it and I liked it because I like birds. So
and one more question about nesting boxes. What should you do at the end of the season? Should you clean it out, take it down?
Yeah. So at the end of the season, you should take the nest box off the landscape because it can be taken over by house sparrows at any time. And you just don't want to encourage house sparrow nesting because they are an invasive species here. So just take them down and then you put them back up towards the end of the winter and the beginning of spring so that then they're out there in time for when the birds migrate back to the landscape.
And I have one more thought before we shut this down, but I know later on that you've typically put up those streamers outside the tree swallow box.
Yeah, the sparrow
Yeah.
spookers. So house sparrows will come in and kill the eggs if they're able to access the boxes. And that doesn't happen everywhere. Right now where we're standing, there aren't really any house sparrows, so we don't put up the sparrow spookers. But on Peters Hill, as soon as the first egg is laid, we put up these, well, Brendan puts up these streamers, these iridescent streamers just on the top of the box. And it scares the house sparrows from actually approaching the box, but it doesn't scare the tree swallows because they're so invested in their eggs that they just kind of fight the fear and fly back in. But it's very effective at getting other species to avoid the box. So you'll see those in some places on the landscape, but it's important that they not be put up until after the first egg is laid, or else you won't have any birds wanting to go in there in the first place.
I think that is it. I think we've covered the questions. People can walk around the landscape with face masks on, and you will see the plastic white tubes, which are chickadee tubes. You'll see the tree swallow boxes. Are there other kinds that are out as well?
There's bluebird boxes, but they are the same as the swallow boxes. You'll just see different species going in and out of them.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Thank you so much, Karla, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Okay, bye-bye.